Welcome to Creative Problem Solving, where we're going to be teaching critical thinking skills for students. My name is Dr. Terry Schroeder. This is my 22nd year in education. I have a very diverse background, assistant director, I'm an adjunct professor. I coach dissertation students, I edit dissertations, I've been an assistant principal, a math interventionist, an academic coach, middle school teacher for ELA, math, science. So I have a very diverse background in education, and so I'm really excited to be here with you today. Our norms and expectations are pretty basic. We want you to have an open mind, heart, mouth, room, and hands. And so that way you are challenging yourself. You're going to be taking some notes. You're going to share your ideas with others, but also take care of yourself. Oh, see, now I missed this slide there. All right, so the first thing I want to kind of look at is a quote here from Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a British biologist and an author. He went to Oxford and he came through and really did a lot of research on genes and how genes work and phenotypes. And so I thought this was a very interesting quote and appropriate for what we're doing today. And it just basically says we do not indoctrinate our children. We teach them how to think for themselves, how to evaluate evidence, and how to disagree with you. And really, that's what critical thinking is all about, being able to think for yourself, how to be able to take that evidence and being able to disagree appropriately with others. Why do we want to do a community builder? It's a way for us to get our conversation started. It helps us to build community with the people that we're working with. We're able to share our experiences and any expertise that we have and really build trust and connections with the people that we are working with. And so today's community builder is called, we're just going to do a reflect and share. So obviously, recording this, so you're not going to necessarily get in a group of 3 or 4, but if you can, let's do that. And what's going to happen is you'll get some think time for the first question, you'll share out within your group, and then we will follow that for the second and third question. And at the end, we are going to share out some interesting facts that we found out about each other within the large group. And so our reflect and share today is called Name 5. So the first one is you're going to come up with your 5 favorite foods or meals. Then after that, you'll come up with your 5 favorite places to be. And then 5 things you did for yourself this summer. So I'm just going to pause. And so that way you can name your 5. So in person, we would be doing a slideo, but with a recording that is very challenging because it has to be done in time. So instead of doing a slideo, we're just going to have you think about the question. When you hear the term critical thinking, what comes to your mind? And so just make a list of different things that come to your mind when you are thinking about critical thinking. For this particular presentation, I have 4 goals set out for us. Our first goal has to do with the rationale, and you're going to explain why critical thinking is essential for learning and essential within your classroom. You're going to have a goal about the process, being able to explain to somebody else a critical thinking or a problem solving process. We're going to also really talk about those common pitfalls that people have, and so you're going to understand what those are. And then the last is you're going to be able to come up with a few activities that you're going to be able to use in your classroom that is going to facilitate critical thinking and problem solving skills. So our agenda basically follows what our goals were. We're going to first talk about the rationale. We're going to then talk about the process of critical thinking. We're going to go through a problem solving process. We're going to talk about some of the common pitfalls people have when we are talking critical thinking. And then we're at the end going to do some fun activities that promote critical thinking and problem solving within your classroom. So, what is critical thinking? Basically, critical thinking is thinking. It's using reasoning skills and information that you know to make a sound, solid decision. Critical thinking is not a natural process. It is something that needs to be taught to people. And when you are first practicing critical thinking, it's hard because it's something that you haven't done before. And what is it not? It's not making a quick decision without those facts and support. Sometimes, we have to make a decision like, one of your students says, "May I use the bathroom?" No, we're in the middle of something right now. You cannot get up and excuse yourself for the bathroom. Give me 5 minutes. That's not critical thinking. That's just decision making. And so critical thinking is that deep thought that has to do with making a sound decision. And so why do we need to teach our students critical thinking? First of all, it improves their life and success. It teaches them about career. Where do they want to go to college? Who are they going to date or marry? It has to do with money. These are all critical thinking skills and things that our kids need to know how to navigate through to be successful in life. Also, their personal autonomy. Critical thinking skills are important about how are they going to dress? Who are their friends going to be? How do they react to peer pressure? And then also evaluating the advice from others. As we know, sometimes we have friends out of convenience, and maybe they aren't the people who are going to help us make the best decisions, but they're going to provide us advice. So we're going to need to be able to be independent critical thinkers to be able to decide if what they're saying is good for us or not good for us. Also, critical thinking is important to our cognitive skills. If you look here, a lot of this stuff, it comes from our Bloom's taxonomy. We're looking at comprehension, analysis, evaluation, constructing things, being creative, and then also communicating with each other. And so our critical thinking skills definitely impact our cognitive skills. And one of the last things why it's important to teach our kids critical thinking is society. If we think about it, we, want to educate them, but we also, in every mission statement that every school has, you'll always hear to become a productive citizen. And here's where those critical thinking skills come in, because they're going to have to vote. They're going to be parts of juries. They're going to have to decide on laws, create laws, follow laws. And then even think of it like here with the crisis. Think of what we've been through as a society with this pandemic these last 2 years. If we had people who didn't have the ability to do critical thinking, we would have been in trouble. And actually, we kind of were. Think about the toilet paper situation and how people were going and hoarding toilet paper and how hard it was to find that. And there was food off the shelves, and how our decisions can impact the society. And so that's where our critical thinking comes in. So we're going to do a quick little activity here, and it's entitled, "Well, what do you like to do?" So what I want you to do is I want you to think about an activity that you do on a regular basis. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be school related, probably personal related would be easier. And then I just want you to be able to answer these 5 questions about the activity. First of all, what is it? Were you good at your activity the first time? Did you need to practice? What would happen if you didn't practice? And would you be better at the activity before or after you practice? And so I'm going to pause here so that way you can come up with your activity and the answers to those questions. So based off of what you came up with, I'm pretty sure that most of you had an activity that, yes, you needed to practice. For me, I thought about basketball. Was I good at it the first time? Well, sure, as maybe a third grader would be. But was I ready for college D1 scholarship? No. Did I need to practice? Yeah. And what happened when I didn't practice? I wasn't as good. And so, um, the connection that I want you to make here with your activity is, in order to get good at something, we have to be able to practice it. And that's where this next slide comes in. Practice does not make perfect. We don't want people to be perfect. We want practice to make it permanent. So it just becomes something that they do every single day using these critical thinking skills to make those sound decisions. So now let's talk about critical thinking in the classroom and what some of this would look like and kind of some of the philosophies behind what we would be doing. The number one thing that we can do as teachers to facilitate critical thinking skills is doing metacognition. Metacognition is that thinking about thinking. It is those think alouds. It's modeling every single day. And so your metacognition is super easy when we're talking math. When you're doing that I do section of your math and you're modeling for a student how to add or subtract, you are thinking out loud and saying what your brain is thinking as you are going through every single step. The same thing as when you're doing that read aloud, like, oh, I just read that sentence. Oh man, I totally don't understand what that means. I should read that sentence again. And then you go back and you reread it and go, oh, okay, now I get it. Okay, now I can move on to the next one. And so you're really kind of teaching your kids what is going on in your brain as you're going. And you need to be able to do that every single day. The other thing is practice, practice, practice. Just like we talked about with that activity that we just did, is kids need critical thinking every day. It needs to be intentional within your classroom. It could be something as simple as incorporating it in your morning work. It could be part of your stations. It could be a part of what your kids do when they finish all their other work, whatever it happens to be. But making sure that there's critical thinking included in what you do every single day. We talked a little bit about Bloom's taxonomy before. Bloom's taxonomy, when we're remembering, we're understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Those are the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And what I'm talking about using Bloom's in your room is having questions and question stems for each of the different levels of Bloom that really get into the higher level stuff, the applying, the analyzing, the evaluating, the creating. So basically asking your kids, how do you know? How are cats and dogs similar or different? How are circles and triangles similar or different? So that way they're doing that comparing and contrasting. What would happen if this happened instead? Being able to change an ending to the story. And all of those things are all critical thinking skills that you would be using within your classroom to teach the kids how to think critically. So moving on. So we are also going to include having a problem-solving process. It's important to have a process in your room. And actually in the next part here, we're going to go a little bit more in depth into what that problem-solving process looks like. But it's important for you to have one in your classroom that you're using and you're teaching and you're enforcing every single day. So we're going to take a little break here and ask yourself, how have you used critical thinking in your classroom? All right, so this next part here is about the problem-solving process. The process that I am going to share with you is a process that I have used with my students. My school used it when I was an administrator there. It's very, very successful. You don't have to use this exact process. The process I'm going to show you works. So basically, I want you to pick a process, whatever it is. I want you to post that process, have an anchor chart in your classroom. I know you guys are virtual, so having a document in your Google Classroom that would have that process on it. Modeling the process. As you are going through and you are modeling that process, referring back to that Google Doc, wherever it's written out, holding the students accountable for the process, and definitely start the year out with it. This shouldn't be something that's just introduced like, oh, we've got testing coming up soon, we should probably start a process. No, no, no. This should be what you do in your classroom every single time. And so that way you won't even need those anchor charts. You won't even need that Google Doc after a while, because the kids are going to know what to do every single time because it doesn't change. And so the process that I've used for problem solving is what we call UPS checks. The U is understanding the problem. So going through, reading the problem, making sure you understand what the problem is asking you to do. That P is making a plan for the problem. How are you going to solve it? What strategies are going to use? What operations do you need? S is solving the problem. So you're going to come up with whatever the answer is. And then the check is somehow checking the answer. So we're going to go through this problem solving process. And as we go through the problem solving process, I'm actually going to have us do a problem so you can kind of see what it would look like. So this sample problem is a 3rd grade math problem. It states Melissa has 24 marbles. John has 19 more marbles than Melissa. Angel has 5 less marbles than John. Tommy has the same number of marbles as Melissa and John combined. How many marbles does Tommy have? And so as you can see, we have a whole bunch of different characters. We have Melissa, John, Angel, and Tommy. We're working with marbles, and some have more than less. And so what we're going to need to do is kind of read through that. So going on, we want the kids to understand the problem. And this is where you have a process for them to follow. The process that we used, that I've used, is circling the numbers. I also have them circle the labels because I want them to have context within what they are doing. Have them cross off any extra information that they don't need so it doesn't distract them. And then writing an answer statement. Out of all the things that I've done with problem solving, writing an answer statement has been the golden ticket. The answer statement is, what are you trying to answer at the end? And I will show you that with this particular problem. So moving on to this problem, as you can see here, I have the 24 marbles circled from Melissa. I have the 19 more marbles than Melissa circled for John. I crossed off the Angel has 5 less marbles than John because Angel has nothing to do with what's going on in this problem. That's that extraneous information that they like to throw in problems. And then I wrote at the bottom that answer statement I was telling you. Tommy has blank marbles. Because if you look at the problem, it says, how many marbles does Tommy have? So I took that question, I wrote it into a statement, and I put it at the bottom. So that way, as the kids are going through and they're circling and they're crossing out, they are not losing sight of what they're trying to do. We want to make sure that they're efficient, but we also want to make sure that they are correct. And that's where that answer statement comes in. So the next step is our P, make a plan. So what strategy is going to make the most sense? What numbers and operations do our kids need? And what are they going to do first? What are they going to do second? What are they going to do third? So before we start making some decisions, let's talk about some of the different strategies that you can use for problem solving. You know, these come down to, and this is just a couple of them. There are tons and tons more. You may have some other ones that you like to use within your classroom, and that's great. It could be drawing a table. It could be making a table, breaking it into smaller pieces. Some problems, as you know, you have to work backwards, being able to visualize what's going on. And then our favorite, trial and error, or, you know, plug it in and check it out and see if it works. And so we have to select one of the strategies for problem solving for this problem. So here's our problem. So which strategies would you think would best fit this problem? So go ahead and take a minute to think about it and think about which strategy would you have your students use first. The strategy that I picked for the kids to use first is smaller pieces, just being able to kind of break it down into exactly what's going on. So what I did is I wrote out that Melissa, she has 24 marbles. I got that from the problem. I wrote down that John is the number of Melissa has plus 19. So I would need to figure that out, hence the question mark. And then Tommy has the same number as Melissa and John combined. And so what I did was I just broke all of that down into smaller pieces. So that way, when I get to the next spot, the next step, which is solving the problem, I can solve the problem. And as you notice, I did include that answer statement at the bottom. So now we are going to solve the problem, and we're going to do the actual work by showing each step. So here is our problem again. And so here's what we would have the kids write out. So Melissa, we know, has 24 marbles. John has the number Melissa has, which is 24, plus the 19, which would then equal 43 marbles. So then Tommy has the number of marbles Melissa has, which we already determined was 24, plus the number that John has, which is 43, to get a grand total of 67 marbles. So in my answer statement, I wrote down Tommy has 67 marbles. Okay, so that's how we solve that problem. The next one is we are going to check the answer. Just because we got an answer doesn't mean we're necessarily correct. And so there's a couple different ways you can check the answer. If it's an algebraic thing, you can just plug in those numbers and do it and make sure that it works. You could do all the work again, double check, which, as we know, when we say double check, most kids don't actually double check. They just look at it and say, yep, I'm done. So I usually have the kids pick a different strategy. And then also using that estimation piece, does that answer make sense? Okay, so going back to our problem that we had, we can use another strategy. So the strategy that I'm using to check the work could be the strategy that you selected first, because most people will resort to this one, and that's the drawing a picture, and that's okay. And so what I did was I drew a picture of the marbles that Melissa had. I believe there were 24. And then I took the number of marbles that Melissa had and put those down for John. And then I added the 19 more to then I could put all of those together to get the number for Tommy. And so that would be a way that you could check the work to make sure that you got to the same final answer as you did before when you broke it into smaller pieces. So take a minute now. What does problem solving look like in your classroom? It's not so important what the process is. I mean, obviously you want to have a sound process, but what's most important is that you've modeled it, you've taught it, and you've practiced it over and over and over again. And so whatever that looks like, just make sure that you are using that. So let's move on to some common pitfalls that we have when we are talking about problem solving and critical thinking in our classrooms. As we said, critical thinking doesn't just develop. It has to be taught. It has to be practiced, and it needs to be explicit and explain to the students, this is what you're doing and this is why you're doing it. And so that's why having that problem solving process for math for sure would really help them teach and think critically. Another common pitfall with critical thinking is you've set up a culture in your classroom where it's not okay to fail. Um, Kids are going to fail. They are going to not be successful in everything they do. And that's okay. That's how we learn. And so you have to have that classroom atmosphere of a good community and trust to say, hey, it's okay. You didn't get it this time, but guess what? We're going to do it again tomorrow, and you're going to get it tomorrow. Another common pitfall is that we don't let the students struggle. We bail them out as soon as they get stuck. Oh, here, you do this next. No, don't do that. We need to teach our kids grit and perseverance, that sometimes things are hard and it's okay to take a day or two to solve problems, because as long as we're moving forward, they need to be able to struggle. So one of the things that I have used in my classroom and we used at my school is what we call the learning pit. And as you can tell, we have a situation in which kids have failed. They fall in the pit. They're confused. They're stuck. They don't know what's going on, but they're going to continue to work hard. They're going to continue to ask questions. They're going to work with their classmates. They're going to work with their teachers. And eventually they get out of this learning pit. The learning pit is a great place to be, but it's not a great place to stay for forever. And so we talk about it. And, you know, when I would walk through classrooms and I would talk to my students at my school, and I'd be like, hey, it looks like you're struggling. And they would say, yeah, Dr. Schroeder, I'm in the pit right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are? Tell me about that. And then they're able to kind of, verbalize where they are in their thinking and where they are in their learning process. So that way they're able to get out of that learning pit. The next thing is something that we as educators struggle with every single day. And that is that time constraint. We have so many standards. We have so many things that we need to teach that sometimes critical thinking and those problem solving skills are just overlooked because we have too much content to teach. However, if we do take the time to really fully develop these skills, the rest of the content will come with it. Okay. And so those are just some of the common pitfalls that, we have found when we are talking about critical thinking and problem solving. So now we're going to get into the fun stuff. Not that the rest of it wasn't fun, but here are some of the activities that we're going to use to promote that critical thinking and the problem solving skills within your classroom. Some of these skills, some of these activities are better for bigger kids. Some of them are better for little kids, but actually I think most of them can be used in all grade levels, just dependent on how you adjust the activity. So one of the classic critical thinking skills that we actually overlook a lot as teachers are sorting activities. Giving the kids a pile of animals. There could be birds and there could be fish and there could be, cows and pigs and chickens and all the like in there. And you give them all the animals and you just tell them to sort them. Every kid will probably sort them different. Some of them may sort them into animals with fur, animals that don't have fur. Somebody else may sort them into ones that don't have any legs, ones that have 2 legs, ones that have 4 legs. Somebody could sort them by, I have a beak and this one doesn't have a beak. So it could be any of those things. Those are all critical thinking skills because they're able to come up with a category and fit all of the cards within a category. The next one is doing something with numbers. If you give the kids numbers 1 through 20, somebody might sort them into evens and odds, 1 digit, 2 digits, prime number, not prime number. Same thing with shapes. You could have 2D shapes and 3D shapes in there. And they would sort them on however they felt as long as the categories fit. And so that would be one of your critical thinking strategies. The next critical thinking strategy is one of my very, very favorites, and these are doing some logic puzzles. So here we have a logic puzzle, and basically what we're trying to figure out is which boy is passionate about what. The first one says Luke doesn't like tennis. So Is if Luke doesn't like tennis, is tennis something he's passionate about? No. And so you would cross it off. And so eventually, once you use all 4 of the clues, you're going to figure out which boy likes which sport and how old they are. And so that is something that you can teach your kids how to do. It's the process of elimination. If one thing's true, something else is not true, and being able to kind of sort through some of the information. And so that is just the one sample there. And I do have, I'm going to have them, we'll pause the video here so you can write this down. The next problems would be like weight on a scales problem. If you look here, we have 48 units on one side, on the left side. And on the right side, there are 6 orange blocks. So if we have 48 on one side and 6 orange blocks on the other, how much weight is an orange block equal to? And we would divide 48 by 6 and we would get 8. So then you would put 8 in that orange box. Then the next one, you have 1 orange box on one side, which we know is 8. And so now we have 2 blue triangles, which is equal to one of the orange squares or boxes. And so what is a triangle equal to? 4. Then on the next one, we have 4 of the blue triangles. And if a triangle is worth 4, one of the green circles is worth 16. Basically, it is starting to develop some of those algebraic thinking concepts and being able to balance things out. And so weight on the scales, there are a ton of different problems out there. They use different shapes to kind of help facilitate that critical thinking and problem solving. And so here is another problem. So we're going to pause right here. So that way you can go ahead and try to solve for your yellow circle, your magenta square, and your teal triangles. Okay, our next strategy that you can use within your classroom to facilitate critical thinking are Sudoku problems. Sudoku has been popular probably for the last 10 or 12 years. If you just Google Sudoku, you can get a whole bunch of free PDF ones, anything from super easy ones to super challenging ones. You teach the kids on how to solve them, some strategies, and you just let them work. And it really helps with their mathematical reasoning and their problem solving skills. So Sudoku would be another strategy that you can use to facilitate critical thinking. The next thing is a way to facilitate critical thinking is not worksheet based. It's something that you're doing within your classroom as you're going. So let's say you give the problem 156 plus 1,232. You tell them the answer is 2,792. Is that answer correct? Why or why not? And so you give them a problem, you give them an answer, and you let the students figure out, are you correct? If you are, why? If you're not correct, why are you not correct? And so where did you go wrong in your thinking? How did you solve it wrong? And then you can even take it a step further. What is the correct answer? And this is teaching critical thinking and problem solving skills to your students. And there's so many possibilities with just coming up with, is this answer correct? Why or why not? And so can we have a healthy conversation about that? Another strategy that you can use is having open-ended math problems. So you're working with money with your, say, your 3rd or 4th graders, and you just say to them, I just reached into my pocket and I pulled out 37 cents. What coins did I pull out of my pocket? So they could say it was a quarter, it was a dime, and 2 pennies. Great. How else could it have been? It could have been a quarter, 2 nickels, 2 pennies. And so you would have the kids come up with all the different possible combinations for that. And then you can always ask Well, which one had the least number of coins? Which one had the most number of coins? Which one only used one dime? Which one only used one penny or whatever? And so you can come up with a whole bunch of different open-ended math problems that have different answers for that. So it's not just, I have 37 cents. How did I get to 37 cents? What are the different possibilities? All right. So I'm going to take a pause here and say, what is one important piece of learning that you're going to be taking with you today? All right, let's take a look at our goals to make sure that we met our goals today. We're supposed to be able to explain why critical thinking is essential to our learning process. We're going to be able to explain the critical thinking and learning process. What are some of the common pitfalls that educators have when teaching critical thinking? And then being able to take 2 or 3 different activities away today that would help us to facilitate critical thinking and problem solving skills within our classrooms. Thank you very much.